Hello, everyone. Today is May 9th, 2023. It's Dia of the Temple of Hatawi. I am with Lauri Lumby with Soul School. And this is our collaborative podcast, Mother's Womb, Mother's Milk. I probably got that backwards, Mother's Milk, Womb, but it's pretty much part 2 of our series. Today, we are talking about the power of words and naming. It's perhaps my favorite tool of undoing, of decolonizing, of really diving deep to look at how we approach things, how we identify the words we use, because it was a teaching tool for me. It was a teaching tool early on that the mothers presented, and it's an ongoing teaching tool, and I love it so much, and I wanted it to be a part of this conversation. And so today we're reflecting on 4 excerpts from the Sufi mystic Hazrat Inayat Khan, from his book, The Mysticism of Music Sound. It's his second book. And we're just going to dive right in and talk about why names and naming is so important, why it's so important for you to do etymology, why it's so important for you to understand that when you take on a name, or when a name is given to you, you understand the relationship between the namer and the one that's named, the definer and the one that's defined. Because as you see in our conversation, the definer, the namer, has the power. Always. No matter how creative you get with the name, or you being defined, ultimately, it's the definer that has power over every aspect of your being. So, that being said, let's get started. So, Lauri, I sent 4 passages, 4 excerpts, that I hope you had some time to reflect on. And if not, it's a living exercise that we could actually just dive right into. The first part, before I even get to that, is there anything you'd like to check in with or comment on to our audience before we move?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm going to lean on you for today's conversation. It's, naming is something that I'm aware of, I'm conscious of. It's something that I've reflected on for myself, certainly in choosing names for my children. And I've done a lot of, I guess I'll say, studies specifically in the Hebrew alphabet and what that means in how we can gain deeper and better understanding of names and words and all of that, to understanding the meaning of the individual letters. I understand the numerology of names and all of that kind of stuff, but it hasn't been central to my study and my practice as it has been for you. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to, number one, learn from you, and to be able to flush this out with you. So I'm excited for the purpose of learning, and probably learning more than sharing, but I'm here.
I think the biggest thing in today's time, in our contemporary time, is understanding the value in the learning, in conversation, in collaboration. It's because
Yeah.
it's, the patriarchal concept. It's, this is the teacher and you're the student. The
Yeah.
teacher knows everything. There is no reciprocity between us because, I'm the teacher,
Right.
you're the student. I know nothing, I know everything. And with the reemergence of, you call it, the primordial mothers, because they're all the
Mhm.
dark mother, great mother, they're primordial.
Yep.
It's relearning reciprocity,
Yeah.
relationality, it's a cyclical back and forth. It's not it's a
Mhm.
two-way street. It's not
Yeah.
one way. So thank you just for being here for the conversation. And I love it because when it's one person talking about, their experiences and how it affects them, there's learning in that too.
Mhm.
It's just so much more rich when you have that conversation with someone else that similar paths with regards to being devotees to, to the primordial mothers or the great mothers, but
Mhm.
lived experience completely different.
Yeah.
So I think it is very valuable and nourishing, especially for those that are looking for inspiration for their path. So Hazrat Inayat Khan, A Mysticism of Music, Sound, and Word. I knew I was missing something. That's the title of the text, and the subtitle is The Sufi Teachings of Hazrat Inayat Khan, Book 2. I'm assuming you could still get it on Kindle. I that's where I have it. I also have a hard copy somewhere and a whole bunch of boxes that have not been unpacked yet. But so the first passage I would love to explore with you is, there is a great secret hidden in a name, be it the name of a person or a thing, and it is formed in relation to the past, present, and future conditions of its objects.
Mm.
What I love most about that is its reference to the past, present, future
Yeah, that's what hit me too.
of that which is named.
Yeah.
And it also brings me to what you said earlier about your studies.
Mhm.
Because I remember, gosh, when was it that California was having that most recent big fires? Was it 2021? I think it was fall of
Mhm.
2021. It was right before I moved out of Oakland into LA. I decided to take biblical Hebrew because it kept coming up in dreams in relationship to Asherah. And we're going to get to that in our very last conversation with Patai. But even like just one aleph, one symbol
Mhm.
has meaning, right? And then you add it with another, and then it becomes a multiplicity. And so it's past, present, future. That that force that is naming
Mhm.
is already ordaining and divining what the nature of that which is named is
Mhm.
in the present and the future. That's what's so poignant for me about that. Any insight for you?
Yeah. As you were sharing that passage, what I saw immediately was, I mean, I'm a mother of two young adults, and what I saw immediately was that their souls brought their name with them. And, I remember the process of naming my children, our children, and like my daughter's name was so easy. Like I knew when I was pregnant, what her name was going to be if she was a girl. I knew she was a girl, even though, had no test to prove that. I just knew. It was right there. This is who she is. And it was so easy. With my son, it was so hard. And it was like, and intuitively, when I tune in with that, I feel like perhaps on the other side, he was still figuring out who he was going to be in this life. And so the name it didn't come. And then it came from outside of us. Like somebody else said, well, how about blah, blah, blah. And their dad's name was Scott. Scott and I were both like, oh yeah, yes, it's Will. And so that past piece really is what spoke to me. And it just, it feels like, for me anyway, as a mother, I felt like my children's names were given to me as opposed to me giving them to them. It's almost like they were whispering in my ear on some level saying, my name in this life needs to be this. And so I was the receiver and the giver at the same time. And it's really interesting watching them live into their name. And my son especially, like, my nickname for him is Willful Will. And it just fits him. Will is the perfect name for that child. So, yeah, that piece really, really struck me. And to me, it speaks about mission. Like, if we're bringing it in from another plane, another life, whatever it is, it's like the name isn't just a name, it's a title, it's a mission, it's a purpose, it's a charge, it's, yeah, all of that.
That is the perfect segue, because as you were speaking, I was like, the names that were given to me, because yeah, my mother named me, very typical Western name. I remember asking her, well, why did you name me that? And in her mind, she was like, because it's unique and you're my firstborn, right? So we already discussed, she was like, I wasn't open and aware as I am now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she was like, my father was so upset that not a single one of my names represented destiny or purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so the names that I have now were names that were given.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, like, I remember in China, when I was working in China as an English teacher, I was sick the whole time, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
Shanghai is extremely polluted. Ningbo, not so much, but still polluted nonetheless. And my health wasn't getting better. It was either dipping or coming back, but still to like an unhealthy. So I was not better. And I remember just praying, and I was like, what do I do? Like, where do I go? I don't want to go back to the US. It's just horrible. Family relations are falling apart. Everything's falling apart.
Right.
And the mothers, like, they used my space of sickness as a space of teaching. So that whole year, it was just initiations. And they would point me to looking up places to go teach or like do workshops at. And I'm like, where would I even do what workshop would I do? I'm asking you to show me. What's next? Show me why I feel this way. Like, I don't even feel like my names represent what I'm supposed to do. Like, the dreams you're revealing to me are so beyond this world. They're just so beyond everything I'm doing. Teaching English, like, I love teaching, but like teaching English, like it doesn't feel like that's my calling. So I don't know who I am. I don't know how to say who I am. My name doesn't speak who I am.
Mhm.
And then they pretty much would guide me to this retreat center in Thailand. And I was like, what? I don't have money for that. And it's called the Kamalaya. And when I read that, I was like, that moment where full body chills, breathlessness, as if you found something, but I was like, I'm not naming myself Kamalaya. It doesn't fit.
Mhm.
So I'm like, well, what does it mean? What does it mean? And it's two Sanskrit words, Kamala, which is another word for lotus, and Alaya.
Mm.
I looked at Alaya, it was like the world slowed.
Mhm.
And I was like, and like my heart rate increased, and then like every silence got loud, and then it
Mhm.
became silence. I couldn't hear silence, but you know what I mean? It was just this overwhelming sensory overload. And I was like, that will be my first name. And I cried. I cried because I was
Oh.
like, it didn't come in a dream. It came like while I was awake, because I'm accustomed to dream revelation, a dream narrative. So for you to say that and going into our second passage, it's like, yes, that's exactly what words, my understanding of words,
Mhm.
it it defines, it sets the tone, past, before you got here, present,
Mhm.
still even in the present, right? It's like it's not linear in a
Mhm.
sense, right? It's that beautiful, fluid, cyclical way of being that
Mhm.
more than one dimension. So the second passage, I love this. All mystery is hidden in a name. The
Mhm.
knowledge of everything rests on first knowing its name. And knowledge is not complete, which is devoid of name. Mastery depends upon knowledge. Humans cannot master a thing of which they have no knowledge.
Mhm.
All blessings and benefits derived from earth or heaven are gained by mastery, which depends upon knowledge, knowledge depending upon name. Humans without the knowledge of the name of a thing is ignorant, and the one who is ignorant is powerless. For humans have no hold over anything of which they have no knowledge. And I had to change man to humans because he kept saying man.
Mhm.
All humans. They say knowledge is power.
Mhm.
What are your reflections on that?
Well, that takes me right into Hebrew. And don't I don't know how these books find their way to me. It's like they fall into my lap. And somehow this book, it's called oh, now I'm forgetting. The author is Rabbi Michael Monk, and it's Wisdom of the Hebrew Alphabet is the name of the book. And he goes letter by letter by letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and goes into like a 50-page explanation of the spiritual meaning of that letter. And that just blew the doors wide open for me, specifically as it relates to Hebrew words and our understanding of scripture and our understanding of certain terminologies. So, for example, Satan doesn't mean Satan like we've been indoctrinated it to mean. It literally means inner adversary, and it's the voice inside of us that struggle. It's the voice inside of us that creates the resistance we need for growth. It's the force inside of us that creates the resistance we need for growth. So it's the voice of our conditioning, it's the voice of self-doubt, it's the voice of the ego, it's the life situations that show up that cause us to decide what path we're going to take. Are we going to take the path of our highest good, or are we going to remain in status quo? And so, that just rips apart all Christian conditioning. And it's, he does a big discussion on the tetragrammaton and, the 4 letters that represent the being, the all-knowing, all whatever being, and talks about Ashura. And, it's like, we can't understand those words, those concepts, until we understand what the individual letters mean, and then put them back together as a whole, like you said before. And so those without knowledge are ignorant, because how many people have even heard the idea that the Hebrew letters each have this deep, varied spiritual meanings, and that when you look at a word like David, or like the names in scripture, David and Moses and Deborah, and they all have meaning as symbols, as archetypes, as mission, as purpose. And it's not just, here's this dude named Moses. The word Moses has a deep meaning to it that speaks of an archetypal mission, a command, a purpose. And yeah, it just, as you were reading that passage, that's where it took me, right to that study. And obviously you can tell I'm excited about it.
Oh, it's so refreshing to see that excitement coming from you, because that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Right. And for you to even, go into the word Satan, and it's so funny because I think I briefly read an article, not the article itself, but just the headline, that a judge somewhere in the South allowed a club around Satan or something to be held at a school. Parents were just like, no, the they're gonna take over our school, and the judge was like, no, Satan's not gonna take over your school. It's I think it's a part of freedom of speech or something like that. And so it's like,
yeah,
obviously within a Christian context, Satan equals the devil, something horrible. It's antithetic to Jesus, and in their narrative.
right.
And so it goes back to, well, what's the origin of the concept and the word, that word, right? Because a lot of Christians don't know Christianity came out of Judaism. And when we're talking about like the line of Mary, some people, or a lot of people, don't know that Mary was also miraculously conceived. A lot of people don't know that that entire line comes from Sarai, which her name was changed to Sarah. And so when we're looking at names and naming, it's like, all right, when your name is changed, who and what is doing the changing and
Mhm.
why, what purpose. And so that's going back to the origin.
Yeah.
That's how I've become uber obsessed, like hyper obsessed with origin.
Mhm.
Going back to the origin, go to the origin. That's why I'm always like the primordial mothers. That's what I'm talking about. The origin of this whole goddess thing that you are putting to the forefront. Like, are you aware of the origin stories not given to you?
Mhm.
Establishment that has named them. And people don't understand why it's so important. Because in your ignorance, you're so easily manipulated, so easily persuaded into doing that which is out of alignment
Mhm.
with your story, which is in your
Mhm.
name, right?
Mhm.
Oh, like I could do a whole course on this. Like, I love it. Like the assignments would be, this passage would be module 2. Your assignment would be to go through all the names and titles that have been given to you and
Mm.
write about its origins and then reflect upon your process. I
Mhm.
think that. And include this whole talk, be like, listen to this talk and everything, because that's how I was able to align with my path. That's how I was able to, that's why I changed my name when I got back to the US. Hold on, the garbage truck is here. Okay, sorry for the pause. But that's how I changed my name. So after Kamalaya, and then I saw that that Sanskrit, when they
Mhm.
combine words and names and letters, things are dropped, things are added. And I was like, okay, so Alaya. And I was like, that's when I went into meditation. I would go into meditation. I would go to work, come home, just go into meditation and say, tell me what else, because that was what invigorated me. That's
Mhm.
what gave me life. That's what gave me a better understanding of purpose, of how my dreams meant something. They really, truly meant something. And so it was a matter of being non-dual,
Mm.
understanding relationship. Things are complementary, but not opposites, not duality, non-dual. So Advaita, um, I had a Vedantic pamphlet that I got from ITP from my tour back in 2008, I think it was. And I traveled with that. So I remember looking at it and highlighting it. And I think there was some passages in there that was just talking about, being integrated, being
Mm.
in alignment. There is no duality. There's no separation. It's not an opposite. So I was like, Alaya Advaita. Okay, great. But what's my last name? So, it's me really
Mhm.
asking. And then it's like, okay, but what's the whole purpose of my journey? Going back to my journals. What is
Mm.
the one obvious common denominator? The mothers. And
Mm.
so I was like, what are last names? And so like this is also part of understanding names and naming. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
what's the purpose of surnames? What's the purpose of last names? And doing that research, right? It defines your family, it defines your tribe, it defines that branch of the group of
Mhm.
people, right? And so in a patriarchal sense, it's the father's house. Your surname represented your father, not your mama, right?
Mhm.
Even her maiden name later in times was still connected to the father.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, but if we're talking about the mother goddess or the goddess or the great mothers, which one do I choose?
Mhm.
I was like, well, which one? Um, And then it was like, it has to be a one connected to the primordial waters of creation. And it has to have a connection to my ancestry. And then I was like, but I have ancestors from all over the world. So which one in particular? Which ancestral thread has narratives about a primordial mother? That's the primordial waters. So you had the Tuatha De Danann, right? The people of Danu. I just felt really attracted to Danu at that time. And then there's Danu in the Indian, India in India, some of their earlier stories. And so I was just like, okay, Danu, it's connected to water. At that time, water was very grounding for me. I was living in between two rivers as well. And so it was looking at all of the things in my waking life, the dreams that I've had, the things that was coming up in meditation. And so that's how Alaya Advaita Danu was born, right? And so I was like, well, what does that mean? Because it's not just my name. It's, as you said, it's your title, it's mission, it's purpose. And so I wrote it out. And I was like, what do each of them mean? And so it pretty much, it means I am. I added, I am, to make it a statement. It's a declaration. So the names are a declaration. I am one who is a realm, a space of non-duality, of indivisibility, where creation and rejuvenation come to pass, right? Because Alaya means realm, a sanctuary, an abode, so to speak, and Advaita, non-dual, indivisible, right? And Danu, where creation and rejuvenation come to pass, the waters of creation. And so it just, I got so excited because I was like, yes, finally, when my name is spoken, that energy will permeate the space and it announces what I'm here to do, who I am. Of course, family didn't like that idea when I got back, and I went through the process of legally changing my name, of modifying my or adjusting my birth certificate, like everything. I wanted to completely erase the name that was given at birth, but then it was like there's some cosmological thing around that I don't have a clear understanding of, but like, how do I imprint the names the mothers have given me to the time at birth, so that because some readers, they're like, I need your birth name. And so it's like, I want to give you the name the mothers gave me, not the other name. They're both numerologically the same as well.
Interesting.
With the spelling and everything. So it's all purposeful, it's all intentional. Knowledge is necessary. It's so very necessary, especially with, you have a Sufi mystic that has names in the same text as sound. Sound and music, vibration, frequency. It's all the things. It's the same with Dia. Dia was given to me in a dream while I was in Nepal. And the next day, the mothers, they kind of came in and sat in the kitchen. And whenever mothers are in the kitchen, it's like they're cooking up something, they're creating something. They kept calling me that, like, you're Dia. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. Another name. I'm not changing it legally, but that will be like my, spiritual / name, and legal documents will remain as you initially intended, because that's exactly it. That's why divinities are very crafty when they give you names. Doesn't necessarily mean that is their name, because guess who has control, right? Do you want that much control in possession of a being that still doesn't know much? No, you don't. But to develop a relationship, you give a name so that they can learn and understand how much power there is in that. Because when you
Mhm.
call forth something, you're working through that. You
Mhm.
can negatively use it and have power over, and that's what we're seeing today, right? But if you work with integrity, you see how calling a name really brings forth that energy and influences or inspires
Yeah.
change in some way.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because as you're unpacking that, what I'm connecting with is um kind of the study and reflection I've given on the name I was given at birth. And there's so many things in my life where I feel like my mom was so tuned in a way that she was not even consciously aware. And, so Lauri and Lumby, that's my birth name. That's the name that was given to me at birth. And, when I look up what's the origin of the name Lauri, it's related to the laurel plant. And then there's the whole tradition of laurel being a symbol for victory, and a crown or a wreath that someone is given to recognize an accomplishment. And recently I was gifted I don't even know what to call it, a spiritual essence spray. And it was made with essential oils and crystals and intention and all this kind of stuff. And one of the primary ingredients was bay. And I had never made the connection in my mind that laurel is bay. Like, it's bay laurel is technically the name of the plant. And so then I looked up the medicinal qualities of bay, and it just all lined up. I'm like, well, that's exactly perfect. And Lumby is like, when I was married, I kind of took my husband's name. So I was Lauri Lumby something else. And it never felt right to me, ever. Like, I'm Lauri Lumby. It's who I am. It's who I've always been. There's the alliteration that goes along with it that, everyone remarks on. And it rhymes. I mean, it's just like the perfect name. And Lumby, technically, the roots of it means person, man or woman of the woods. And that's where I feel the most at home, and I always have, is in a forest. And so it just totally resonates with me and feels appropriate and accurate. And I haven't really thought a lot about my middle name, which is Ann, and it's ANN, specifically spelled without an E. And my first name is Lauri without an E. And as you were talking, I thought, well, Anne and Anu. And so I just felt that connection, and I'm like, that feels appropriate. And my favorite part about my name, more than anything else, is it's 13 letters. And 13 is my magic number. And yeah. So I just have to thank my mom, because she was tuned in on some level that she was able to receive the exact perfect right name for me. And yeah, and I have never had any desire to change my name or to take on any other names, because it just feels so right.
And that is awesome. That's good.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not changing or taking names for the sake of it. It's
Right.
understanding right? It's really understanding. And, it's not to say if my mother decides to ever listen to this, it's not to say that the name that was given to me at birth didn't serve purpose. It did.
Right.
Because if you look at the first name, it's an ewe, which is a female goat or animal of
Mhm.
color in that sense, which was a sacred animal to Ninsargal, one of the mother divinities of Sumer.
Oh,
Right? So she was aware in her own way with where she was. And so it's like my names were gateways, right?
yes.
And Ashley, my middle name, which is fascinating because I have a paternal sister. We're the same age. We're born 3 months apart, same hospital, different moms, same year. Her middle name is also Ashley, but hers is with the Y. Mine was with an EI. Ashley from Ashley, Ashley and the Irish name. So
Yeah.
it was all there,
Right.
hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw my birth given name as a cloak, right? Like
Mm.
my upbringing, I lived a full privileged life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I feel is absolutely necessary because when I look at my work now, whoo, Lauri, if I didn't have the childhood I had, I don't think I'd be as engaged as I am now.
Mm.
So even though I didn't love my name as I got older, because I started to learn more about purpose and
Mm.
what it was I'm supposed to be doing in life, I see its value. Like
Yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, I totally get it. It was a total veil. It was a total treasure box that said, okay, when you're ready to open this,
Yeah.
be ready to transform it. Um, and I did, like I totally appreciate it, but I would never walk around saying this was my former name. No,
Right.
served its purpose. And this is how it got me to where I needed to be. So, absolutely. I love it how integral and intricate, the process is when people see
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
Because the next passage, whew, can touch it can touch upon, the socio-political context of names and
Mhm.
naming. And it especially when we're talking about marginalized groups that
Mhm.
have their names and cultures, but then they're given
Yeah.
a name by the dominant culture. And the way the dominant culture defines it, that's how the dominant culture will interact with
Mhm.
those. And it's like, well, if you keep that name on, then it's no matter what you do or how you do it with that
Mm.
name, the definer will still treat you in the way that defines you. Versus if you're like, nope, that's not what I am. This is who I am. This is who I've always been. And here's the historical context for your ignorance. There's a shift. There's a change.
Mhm.
Um, it's not to say you won't ever come up with resistance. It's just that energy that permeates from you does so in truth. And when you come up against those that want to utilize the definer,
Mhm.
it starts to break down
Yep.
because they see they have no power because you're not wearing that the name that you were defined by.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read that
Oh,
passage.
good.
Every name reveals to the seer the past, present, and the future of that which it covers. Name is not only significant of form, but of character
Mhm.
as well. The meaning of name plays an important part in a human's life. and the sounds, the vowels in the name, the rhythm, the number, and nature of the letters which compose it, the mystical numbers, symbol, and planet, as well as the root from which it is derived, and the effect which it produces, all disclose their secrets to the seer. The meaning of a name has a great influence upon its possessor as well as upon others.
Mhm. What I hear, what shoots right up as you say that is about the possessor. And I immediately think of the way in which names have been used to oppress. And, I think of the African diaspora and, slavers giving them names that were not tribal or traditional. It was white people names. They were, colonized names. And, the same with First Nations people and how their names were taken away from them, in addition to their language and their culture and their traditions and their beliefs and all of that kind of stuff. And it's interesting observing the kickback that I can specifically the kickback from First Nations and African diaspora when they're reclaiming their tribal names, when they're reclaiming their ancestral names, and the kickback they're getting from white people because they don't want to comply. White people don't want to take the time to learn how to pronounce words that are foreign, to learn how to understand it, to overcome the habits of calling people by colonized names. And it's just it's interesting to observe that, and I feel the tragedy behind that. Like this is so dumb, but it's the reference that I can come up with, right, that just popped into my head. So I follow all of these actors that are part of this TV show that I absolutely love. And this TV show has a lot of First Nations characters and a lot of First Nations actors that are, part of the cast. And all of the First Nation actors have a white name and a First Nations name. And that's incorrect. Many of them have only First Nation names. Some of them have both. And I would just love to see that they could all use their First Nations name all the time and not have to be this/that. And I feel like it's a responsibility as a white person to ask, help me to know how to pronounce this. Help me to know what it means. Help me know you through your name. And anyway, that's what I heard in that, was the way that names have been used to oppress. And I'm glad to see little glimpses of that changing. Yeah.
to oppress, to erase,
Yeah.
and all with the intention of the hopes of the truth not re-emerging. Because there's this, silly thing with it's in the scripture. Yes, you give the name because you think you have the power to, without clearly understanding the ramifications of that.
Mhm.
It's not in truth, it's out of balance.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Nature will right itself again, right?
Mhm.
Nature will rebalance itself. And there's nothing you can do about it because you're not, first of all, you're not nature in and of itself, you're a part of it.
Mhm.
And you didn't honor the nuances of nature. You decided to desecrate it
Mhm.
by transgressing, by attempting to erase and attempting and oppressing, really. That's why I find my work like really coming into the name that was the most recent name that was given, curandera,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And it's like, well, thank the heavens, I'm aware that I have ancestry from that area.
Yeah.
I and here's the thing. It's like I tell people I have ancestry from all over the world. No matter what,
Mhm.
you take all the DNA tests, you do a quantitative analysis of it, keeping in mind the bias of interpretation through each company. Every aspect of, well, the Americas, North, Central, and South, it's there.
Mhm.
All parts of Africa, Middle East, India, East Asia, Europe, it's all there.
Yeah.
And then it shows up in my dreams. It shows up in my meditations when I'm not even looking for it, right?
Mm.
It's like I'm not looking for validate for me my connection to this because I want to use this.
Right.
It show me what I need to know right now because I don't know what to do. And then something from India will show up and I'm like, what does that mean to me right now? I have no idea. But I'll do the research and then I'll say, oh, that's what that means.
Mhm.
So with curandera, this was after I did my apology for being sassy. Do not ever be sassy to your ancestral divinities. Not be sassy because they will tell you either tell you in a hot minute that you need to apologize, or they'll show you. And showing is not the way to go because things will fall apart. And if you got pretty lofty stuff, you want to keep that, just don't be sassy. But I was sassy. I tend to get away with a lot, but character, again, when it comes to character, I have no immunity whatsoever. So I did my apology in front of my shrines, in particular the three mothers that came to me and was like, you need to apologize. And I apologized, but I also explained, I was like, look, I've had enough. What's
Mhm.
my next step? That's when the fasting came in. And I remember sitting in front of one of them because she requested crystals, but very specific.
Mm.
And they're Lemurian quartz, and they're
Mhm.
Brazilian. There's the Brazilian and Colombian. The Colombians are super clear, super duper clear, like crystal clear spring water, like and then the Brazilian ones, some are super clear, others aren't so clear, but the energy from both is just
Mm.
phenomenal. So I went through some of the shards that I had, the points that I had, and I put it in front of her. And then I said, okay, what now? Because I'm like literally, okay, what now? Come on. Right.
Yep.
And I kept hearing just like a ebb, as if you're about to get a headache. And you kind of like feel it coming on,
Mhm.
be in the back of your head, behind your eyes, at the top of your head. Like I was just feeling it. And it was Ishel. And I was like, what about Ishel? And she came to me like 2 years ago when I was deepening my relationship to cacao. But this was the cacao from Ecuador.
Mm.
I remember I bought cacao from Guatemala because I wanted something that came from the hands of women.
Mm.
And I had to search high and low for it. But this cacao comes from a collective in Guatemala, and they sell their cacao to vendors that are doing
Mm.
spiritual work. And that's the cacao that really doesn't upset my system, but that really helps me to connect.
Mm.
And the shell came through strongly with that particular cacao. So I was like, okay, let me look up Ishel again, because I that was like 2 years ago. I didn't write
Mhm.
anything down, but I recorded it. She's a lot of her stories obscured, first of all.
Mhm.
But what's commonly known is that she's a Mayan divinity of midwifery and healing, childbirth, all things woman, and healing. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. Look at what I'm getting into now. Okay, Ishel, where do you want me to go now? So I'm on Wikipedia because I like to find their
Mhm.
references, right?
Yep.
Reading. And then I come across a section that talks about the Guatemalan midwives, right? And their idioms, which I forget what that's translated into, but I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like heavy on the whole Guatemalan
Yep.
cacao. And then I read that the Guatemalan birth workers is a calling.
Mm.
It's a calling. It's not like you wake up one day and say, oh, I want to do this, and you go and train.
Right.
And the way they receive their calling through dreams. Through dreams. And so I'm in a whirlpool right now, or a wormhole. I like to say wormhole instead
Yep.
of rabbit. I'm in a wormhole looking up scholarship, like case studies, and I'm reading these articles, and I'm like, wait, how did I get here? Oh, through Ishel and Curandera. How is that connected? And so I'm just reading it, and it's coming up. So with the Guatemalan midwives, if they don't answer their calling, their health, physical ailments manifest, health
Yep.
issues manifest, and no matter what you do medically, it doesn't go away. And if you don't answer that calling, death happens. And
Mhm.
this is according to the case studies that I'm reading, and I'm like, oh, that's really extreme. But it's a necessity.
Yeah.
If you read something and it's like you don't answer it, you die, because that's what you were created to do. That's what you're here to do. And so how this all ties into names and naming, I didn't come up with curandera. Like it
Mhm.
after Ishel, I was just hearing that. And so reading, I've only read about the midwives and how their calling is revealed. I go to sleep happy because I'm like, my birthwork training that I'm doing right now
Mhm.
is in the collective of BIPOC women, and it's BIPOC women only. And the women they're a lot of them speak Spanish only.
Mhm.
The facilitator the women come from Mexico and First Nation. So I'm like, yes, I'm on the right track. And I'm also saying to myself, how is this connected to all the other dream journals? And I was like, oh no, it'll come to me. And it comes. Curandera, the
Mm.
shaman, the female, the medicine woman. And curanderas have specific paths. You can be
Mhm.
a curandera that's focused on midwifery,
Mhm.
herbalism, or just XYZ.
Mhm.
But with that term, curar means to heal.
Mm.
And so it's like, well, what type of curandera? Like, because I'm not, and I always say to them, I'm not going to name. You have to name.
Yeah.
I'm the conduit. I'm your hand. I'm your right hand. I'm your action. I'm helping to bring this back, bring back all the things you've already shown me. What specifically? And they just kept saying rebirther, rebirth, the curandera of the madera. And I'm saying to myself, what's a madera? It sounds like mother, but modern Spanish, it means wood. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm.
I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So I need to dig deeper. Old Spanish, it means mother.
Mm.
So I share all of that because when somebody gives a name, of course, look at who's giving the name,
Mm-hmm.
power that they have, because that power will influence that which is named. And so to hear Madera and see that it means wood and see that it has nothing to do, not really, but then to see, oh, Old Spanish, it means mother. It's just, a constant, you are the midwife of the mothers, of their stories. And I'm like, I can't find in-depth information of Ishel's story. So I'm like, okay, Ishel, you're the next, you're up, right? So it's like, okay, you're up. I'm gonna come to home, part of my ancestral home, to really tap into that, to say, okay, what needs to be revealed? What's hidden, what's unseen that needs to be seen? Integrating that for my work, yes, of course, but allowing the collective to utilize it in a way that's best for them. And that's the difference between the possessor, the namer, right, and a collaborator. The namer would do the research and say, this is the name, this is what it means because of my intellectual exercise and privilege. As collaborator, it's like, I have a connection to this, but I will not speak for it because that's not my place. I will share what was revealed to me, and you will see that I'm coming with 30 years of experience in dream revelation. Take what's of value, let it inspire you. Because I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to show you how it can be done. You are at liberty to do in ways that's best for you, because that's how healing happens. It's about healing. And so really understanding the position of the namer.
Yeah.
Right. And then like really looking at identity and just how so much of that is hidden, unknown, lost, really, right? How do you find that? How do you reclaim that? And I feel part of my responsibility as a curandera, like I'm owning that. I'm owning it, because after each night of that revelation, that's all they're talking about. That's all they're explaining it to me using similar words, but I'm just like, okay, I repeat it enough and it'll become annoying, right? Or something for me to be comfortable with, because I understand the whole pushback with cultural appropriation and whatnot, right? You don't speak Spanish. Well, I grew up learning it. Right. And so it's a part of my culture. It's a part of my identity, but the identity I wear is the one that's given by those that know. So that's why it's like, I am mixed with a multiracial identity, because you can be mixed and just have a monoracial identity. And that's your choice. But I can't walk around holding one thread. I have
Right.
to walk around with the tapestry. And so my part of my duty is to show up embodying that,
Mm.
but also saying, hey, this is, we're in this cycle of renewal.
Mhm.
This is my lived experience. I've traveled in the past. I've traveled across realms and dimensions and communicated. Here's my proof if you need it, right? I'm
Mhm.
ask questions. Um, but I'm not going to tell you how to live your culture. I'm sharing what's come through. I'm
Mhm.
sharing why I'm here. Um, take what's of value and leave the rest. But understand the names
Yeah. Yeah.
and where it comes from, because it influences your life.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. Names define things. Barry
Mhm.
Sandow, he God, his work on lexicon and just looking at the early philosophical discourse. Um, he has this part on Anaximander's discourse on arche. It's my favorite out of his entire work. In order for something to be well established, its
Mhm.
arche, its origin has to be well established. And that's well established quality comes from that which is immutable, that which is
Mhm.
immovable. It comes from the Most High.
Mhm.
So when it comes to identity, the colonizers knew what they were doing. They just knew what
Oh
they were
yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to identity, knowing the name and knowing how it came to be, knowing what created it is what will heal you, is
Mhm.
what will bring wholeness. And also seeing how you got disconnected and making peace with it, right? Um, but even if people choose to continue to utilize the name given to them, do so from a place of informed awareness, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, now I know where this whole identity came from. However, this is what I truly am, but I'm still going to walk with this because so much has come from it. So much, it's nourished me in so many different ways, but this is who I truly am. But let that be your choice.
Yeah.
Um, one more thing before I be quiet, so you can provide some input. I'm really passionate about this if you haven't noticed. Um, but this big controversy around Jada Pinkett's documentary on Netflix of Cleopatra. So I don't know if I'm going to watch it or not. Not because she's making it a documentary, but because where I am right now, the focus is something else completely different.
Right.
Like the way the revelations have come to me, it's different stages of
Mhm.
revelation. The information is necessary for a specific time and space. Right now, it's not. I'm just going to there's a lot of heat in Egypt because they're like, if it's a documentary, so that's committing an act of erasure, as opposed to if it was just a film. Because with Jada Pinkett, it's her wanting to show Black women of
Mhm.
power as a way to provide historical role models for Black women. And so for me, in reading the Egyptian response, the most hurtful ones, just as a human,
Mhm.
as someone of mixed race background, mixed ancestry, seeing people say Cleo, ancient Egyptians weren't Black. Black people were slaves. And so to see that is like, so the whole concept of Black, according to a lot of people, equates to slavery, equates to incapable of having contributed to the human narrative outside of that. right? Because when you look at the transatlantic slave trade, that's exactly what was created.
Mm-hmm.
And so to say, and so for me to take that label based off of ignorance,
Mm-hmm.
intention to erase and to project it onto strong figures in history is inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
My thing, right? So I would never call any pharaohs, I wouldn't call them that.
Mm-hmm.
Call them what they call themselves. And in order to understand that, you would have to look at their names. You'd have to travel back in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does one build themselves to be a voice to of the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like being a shaman, being a medicine person, female or male, that's a huge responsibility with
Mm-hmm.
regards to healing past narratives. So I would never call a pharaoh, female pharaoh, male pharaoh, I would never call them Black
Mm-hmm.
because they never call themselves that,
Mm-hmm.
right? I would use a name created by an oppressor to define anything of the distant past, not especially when the oppressor is a whole lot younger. That
Mm-hmm.
mindset is a whole lot younger, right? And that's my 2 cents. So
Mm-hmm.
but just seeing the controversy of that going on, I'm just like, I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
leave. Because I and with the Egyptologist, they did consult on. I do agree with this Egyptologist. She's a woman of European descent, and she says we don't know what her mother looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the case with 99% of the women in historical narratives of the patriarchal story. We don't know anything about the woman. We don't know anything about the mama. We assume way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much. And so when I look at my dream narratives and they reveal information, I'm just like, oh, okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. I go do I
Mm-hmm.
look at scholarship differently. I'm like, okay, I don't know what you want me to do with this. I'll integrate it for myself. But
Mm-hmm.
when the time is right, I will share it. And so now I'm seeing with my whole dissertation project, it's giving voice to them, to
Yeah.
these, and it's not just the flesh and blood beings, it's the deities themselves, because their stories have been subverted or
Mm-hmm.
erased, and erased, I should say. So, whew, I'm sorry, I just I'm so passionate about it. Oh, names and naming and origins. It's a passion because that's just what I am.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, it's I don't know anything about the documentary and the controversy, so it's interesting for me to hear your perspective on that and to hear, pieces of it that you've studied. And so I can't make any comments about that because I don't know anything about it, but I appreciate what you're saying. Back to the naming. Oh my God, when you were talking about the wood,
Yeah.
it brought me right back to Ashura, because
Yes.
there is not one single English translation of the Bible where you're going to see the name Ashura. It all says pole or wooden pole.
I remember that in my research,
Yeah.
but go ahead. Go ahead.
And as you were talking about, now I'm not going to be able to pronounce the word. Is it Madeira?
Madeira.
Madeira. Okay. So that Madeira was colonized to mean wood, but really it meant mother. There's a connection there. There's a connection there. And the common piece is that the oppressor took the matriarchal, took the divinity out of a word and turned it into an everyday object. And, the Book of Kings is the only book in Hebrew scripture that mentions the Asherah pole or the wooden pole. And in every single passage, it's tear it down, get rid of it, eliminate it, blah, 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 blah. And what we're seeing when we have the eyes to see and the knowledge to understand is that that whole book is the historic, reflective history of the patriarchy combating the persistence of the divine feminine. And it's always been present in this particular case in the Hebrew tradition, is this aspect of the divine that is mother, that is queen, that is bride, that is, all potential aspects of the feminine. And how hard the patriarchy had to work to get rid of it. And how ultimately unsuccessful they were. And the unsuccess to me, or the proof of the unsuccess to me, is the worship of Mother Mary. And I don't care how hard the Catholic Church argues that Catholics, I'm raised Catholic, so I can say this. I don't care how hard the church argues that, well, we don't worship Mary. We, honor and revere her, or something like that. I call BS. Catholics absolutely worship Mary. And they would not use that word, but their actions are the actions of a devotee, are the actions of someone who is worshiping a divine mother. And what cracks me up is the names. If you ever Google all the names of Mother Mary that have been official titles given by the Catholic Church, they're all God names. It's like Mother of God. Okay, you can't be the Mother of God if you're not a God yourself. Queen of Heaven. All of these titles are saying this is a divinity that we are honoring and recognizing. This is a divinity who gets these titles. And anyway, now I'm getting excited. The point being, number one, the etymology of words, and even more than the etymology, the history of the word. So how did Madeira become wood? How did Asherah become wood? And looking at the history of the patriarchy trying to usurp the mother, and how hard they have had to fight for that, first of all, to the point of killing people for doing mother worshipy sort of things, like, oh my God, trying to heal somebody, sharing herbs, bringing children into the world, all of those things, and how completely unsuccessful they've been. And you can't destroy the mother. You absolutely can't destroy the mother. It's part of our psyche. It's part of who we are. And we intuitively and inherently know that the divine cannot be father only. And in fact, can that which brings forth all be father? Like, that's not the function of father. The function of father is to plant the seed. It's not to bring forth creation. That's the mother. So anyway, that's the end of my soapbox.
I love especially you. Thank you for reminding me about the Asherah pole.
Yeah.
Because yes, absolutely. You see, they speak in tongues, and that's the other thing. The divine doesn't speak English. It speaks in parables, it speaks in riddles, it speaks in story, nuance and multi-layered. I also love how you said it's not just the etymology that's important, but the history of the making of the word, or the changing of the word. Its original function to now its modern function. That touches upon matriarchy, which is our next topic. It goes back to that paper, the draft I submitted to that journal, and the reviewer was like, oh, I'm not convinced of the archaic form of matriarchy. It's already been defined. Well, of course it's been defined, and it's changed.
Yeah.
I'm highlighting its archaic definition. How could you not even?
And the definition's already been challenged. Like, to say it's already been defined is absolutely revealing that they're ignorant of the scholarship, because the scholarship has already challenged the definition of matriarchy and the historical reality of it.
So thank you for your soapbox. Appreciate it. It is appreciated. Last, and I think we've really touched upon it too, is the names given by the holy ones have a double effect, that of the name itself and that of the will of the one who gave it. Name itself and the will of the one who gave it. So we're talking about the holy ones. Their power in that name. See, I love this. This is like one of my favorite topics.
Yeah. And the first question I hear in that is, then who is the true giver? Because is the will of our parent, or is the will of the holy ones, the higher power source, in revealing that name to the parent and giving that name to the child? Or, as you've experienced in your own life, the ancestors, through your dreams and through your meditation, giving you the name. So it's who's the giver and who's the ultimate giver. And this is a really stupid thought. I don't know where this came from, but guess I'm sharing it. So somebody who I know, their name is spelled in a unusual way, not the usual way that it would be spelled in Western culture. And they get asked questions all the time about, well, why is your name spelled that way? And the answer is literally that the nurse wrote their name down wrong on the birth certificate. And so as we were saying, who's the giver? Then I thought, okay, so the parent had X intention for the name, but it was spelled differently on the birth certificate. So was it the will of the holy ones that their name be that, not what their parents originally intended?
Exactly. Ooh, the depth. The depth.
Yeah.
And I can understand why people don't want to do the work. I can
Yeah.
understand, but at the same time, it's like, why wouldn't you want to?
It's
You
so
can have so
fun.
much See? Oh, I love it. See, that means we're doing the work. It's all synchronistically aligned. I love that. Ooh, that's beautiful. Of course it's fun. It's awesome. It is awesome. Lauri, this is
Mm.
any last reflections on this topic?
No, just thank you. Thank you for asking the questions. Thank you for pursuing the answers. Thank you for inviting anyone who's listening to ask those same questions. I think that it's, these are the things that so many don't think about. And like I understand why people don't want to think about that stuff. They don't want to dive down into it. But to me, it's all part of self-realization. To go back to our last session, and it's how we come to know ourselves. And it's how we can begin to have healthy, accurate communication with each other. And, it's to say, what's that saying? To know is to be known, something like that. It's important because we've lived way too long in a world that would prefer that we remain ignorant and that we don't know.
And it's kind of hard to do that when that which is natural is to be flourishing, is continuity, right? So
Mhm.
if something remains stagnant for too long, conditions and events will happen
Yep.
for the flow to happen again. I mean, it's everywhere. You look out in the cosmos, you may say, oh, the sun will always look like that. No, it has solar flares, it's growing, it changes. It's change is inherent. It really is. So,
Mhm.
truth finds its way,
Yep.
balance finds its way. It's just a matter of you being open to it or not. And if you're not open to it, everything around you will, that
Mhm.
which. So, yeah. And no question is a stupid question or thought. It's all contributed in some way. Somebody else probably would have that thought or question. So it's never that. It just adds more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So please keep them coming, even if you think, oh my gosh, no. Right.
Mm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for this. This
Thank
is
you.
my favorite one. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Our next talk is on matriarchy. I'm excited about that too. I'm so excited. So excited. So I'll email some concepts, curiosities.
Yeah.
And then we'll just have a discussion about that.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you for showing up, Lauri.
Thank you.
The listeners for showing up, laughing with us, going, aha, even though we can't hear you. I hope this has been nourishing, and I hope it provides that catalyst to move forward or to open up, because that's what it's here for. And so until next time, ciao for now.
Ciao for now.